I need some time to myself, she said casually, tossing the words as if they were nothing, as if they didn't hit harder than a wrecking ball aimed at our entire relationship. We were in the middle of a routine argument, nothing special. I thought it would be the same old bickering, a little tension, then we'd both cool off and move on. But there was something in her voice that day, something I couldn't ignore. It wasn't the usual frustration or irritation. It was cold, almost detached. For a second, I wasn't sure I'd heard her right. Time to yourself, I repeated, half expecting her to backpedal or explain that she just needed a little break from the fight. But instead, she crossed her arms, sighed sharply, and avoided looking at me. Yeah, time to think, to figure things out. It felt surreal. This was my wife, my partner, my supposed ally, telling me that she needed space. My instinct was to ask more, to try and understand it, to ask if this was just a temporary thing. Was there something I could do to fix this? But her responses were brief, vague, and maddeningly indifferent. It's not about you, she said. It's about me. I need this. I couldn't argue with her. There was no point. Her mind was made up, and the way she said it, with such casual indifference, only made it worse. It wasn't a cry for help or even frustration. It was the clear conclusion of something she had been thinking about for a while. This was how she chose to tell me. I walked away, not out of anger, but because I didn't trust myself to speak. My mind was spinning. I didn't know how to process what had just happened. It wasn't the request for space itself that shook me. It was the realization that this wasn't the first sign of trouble. It was just the most obvious one. That night, as we moved silently through the house, her words played over and over in my head. I'd always known that we had issues, but I never imagined we'd get to a point where she openly asked for distance from me. What had I missed? What had I done, or not done, that made her feel like I was the one she needed space from? As I thought back, I realized I had ignored the small signs, the growing disconnection, the way she stopped engaging in our conversations, her increasing focus on her own life. It was like a puzzle I didn't know I was trying to solve. And now, all the pieces were finally falling into place. She hadn't said it directly, but the message was clear. She wasn't happy, and hadn't been for a long time. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, replaying every moment that could have led to this. I thought about the arguments, the compromises, and the times I had put her needs before mine, thinking that was what a good husband did. Yet here we were. The next morning, I tried to open up a dialogue again. Are you sure this is what you want? I asked. I wanted to believe that maybe she'd change her mind, that we could work through this together. But her answer left no room for hope. I just need time, she said, as if it were that simple. It wasn't simple for me. This wasn't how I had imagined my marriage. I wasn't the type of person to give up easily, especially not after investing so many years. But as I sat there looking at her, I realized something. She wasn't just asking for space. She was telling me she was done trying. Whether she said it directly or not, her actions spoke louder than anything she could have said. That was the moment I stopped asking questions. If space was what she needed, then I'd give it to her. Just not in the way she expected. After our conversation, the silence in the house was suffocating. She avoided me, moving around the house like a ghost, and I let her. What was there to say? Every time I thought about reaching out, I stopped myself. What was the point? She had made her position clear. So, I turned inward. My thoughts became my constant companion, and they weren't kind. I started replaying the years we'd spent together, trying to find where I had missed the cracks. And that's when it hit me. The cracks weren't hidden. They were right there in front of me. I had just chosen to ignore them. I thought back to the early days of our marriage, how I had thrown myself into being the best partner I could be. Every time she had a dream, I put my own aside to help her chase it. I rearranged my career for her schedule. I spent hours listening to her vent about work, friends, and family, always ready to support her. And when things got tough, when stress ran high, I was the one to shoulder the burden, without complaint, or so I thought. But now, looking back, a bitter truth emerged. She had taken all of that for granted. Every compromise I made came with an expectation for the next. Every time I put her needs above mine, it wasn't reciprocated. It was absorbed as though it were owed to her. And now, after all those years of putting her first, I was left with indifference and distance. A partner who needed space because, apparently, even my presence had become too much for her. It felt like waking up from a dream and realizing the reality around me wasn't what I thought it was. I had believed in us. I had believed that we were a team, that our struggles were just temporary hurdles to overcome. But now, it was painfully clear I was the only one still fighting for this marriage. The realization made me angry at her, but mostly at myself. How had I let this happen? How had I allowed myself to become so small in my own life? I used to be ambitious, driven. I had goals that didn't revolve around someone else's happiness. Yet, over the years, I had erased parts of myself, thinking that was what love required. Now, I started seeing our relationship for what it truly was, one-sided. While I had been bending over backward to make her life easier, she had been drifting further away, prioritizing herself at every turn. The bitterness I felt wasn't just about her actions. It was about my own complicity. I had enabled this dynamic. I had let her needs eclipse my own because I thought that's what love required. Sitting there alone with my thoughts, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. If she needed space, maybe it was because she had taken too much of mine. It was time to reclaim what I had lost, even if that meant letting her go in the process. I wasn't sure how to do it, but one thing was clear. The sacrifices I had made for her weren't going to define me anymore. After days of reflection, the anger began to settle into something sharper, clarity. I realized I couldn't change her mind. That wasn't my role anymore, if it ever had been. What was left for me to do? Keep chasing after someone who didn't want to be caught? No, that wasn't going to be my story. The first step wasn't loud or dramatic, it was resolute. I was done trying to fix things for her. If she wanted space, she would get it, but on my terms. For years, I had been the one to bridge the gaps, smooth over the cracks, make sure everything kept moving forward. That wasn't my job anymore. She asked for time to think. Fine. I'd use that time to reclaim my life. It started with small but deliberate choices. I stopped chasing after conversations, no longer the one to fill the silence between us. The quiet was heavy at first, awkward, suffocating, but I refused to break it. If she wasn't going to talk, neither was I. For the first time in a long time, I let her feel the distance she had been creating for years. I started dismantling the framework of our shared life, piece by piece. The bank accounts were the first to go. I removed my name from everything joint and ensured my financial independence. I wasn't being cruel, but I was firm. I had spent enough of my money supporting her whims while ignoring my own needs. That chapter was over. Next, I began to reclaim the house. It had always felt like our space, but as I looked around, I realized how little of it truly reflected me. Nearly everything, the decor, the arrangements, was her choice. I started clearing out the things that no longer felt like they belonged. Her stacks of books, her personal touches, they all went into boxes. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I needed to make the space my own again. Emotionally, the hardest part was letting go of the instinct to care. For years, I had prioritized her needs. If she seemed upset, I'd ask what was wrong. If she was overwhelmed, I'd step in to help. But now, when she came home looking exhausted or stressed, I stayed silent. When she sighed dramatically, waiting for me to ask what was bothering her, I didn't bite. It wasn't about being unkind. It was about unlearning the role I had played for so long. The first time she noticed the change, she confronted me. "Why are you acting like this?" she demanded, her tone sharp with irritation. I met her gaze, calmly saying, "I'm respecting what you asked for. You said you needed space, and I'm giving it to you." She blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of my answer. For once, I wasn't arguing or pleading. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was just done. Her reaction was telling. She seemed confused, maybe even angry, as if she hadn't expected me to take her request seriously. But I didn't owe her any further explanation. If she wanted space, she could have it, all of it. Each day, I felt a little stronger. Each decision I made felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The sacrifices I had made no longer felt like badges of honor. They felt like weights I was finally learning to set down. This wasn't about punishing her or even saving myself. It was about reclaiming the respect I had lost somewhere along the way. By the time she noticed how much had changed, how much I had changed, it was too late. I wasn't the same person she had taken for granted all those years. I wasn't waiting for her approval, her gratitude, or her attention. I was focused on one thing only, moving forward without her holding me back. It didn't take long for her to notice that things were shifting. At first, she seemed indifferent, as if my changes didn't matter. She still moved around the house with the same detached attitude, avoiding meaningful conversations. But when she tried to withdraw money from the joint account one evening and found her access revoked, everything changed. She stormed into the living room, holding her phone like it was evidence in a trial. "Why can't I access the account?" she demanded, her voice sharp, almost incredulous. I didn't look up from what I was doing. "I separated our finances," I said simply. "You wanted space, so I figured it made sense to make things clearer." Her face shifted from confusion to anger. "You can't just cut me off like that. We're married. This is our money." I set my book down and met her glare. "It hasn't felt like ours for a long time," I said. "You made it clear you wanted space. I'm just giving you what you asked for." Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought she might argue further. But instead, she spun on her heel and left the room. It wasn't the last confrontation, but it was the beginning. Over the next few days, she grew increasingly confrontational. She accused me of being cold, of punishing her for asking for what she needed. "You're acting like I'm the enemy," she said one night, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I shook my head. "I'm not punishing you. I'm respecting your wishes. You want a distance, so I'm stepping back. That's all." Her frustration mounted. She wasn't used to this version of me, the one who didn't bend to her emotions, who didn't rush to smooth things over. For years, I had been the one to de-escalate conflicts, to bridge the gap when things got tense. Now I let the tension sit. If she was uncomfortable, that was her problem to solve. The arguments came in waves, each one more intense than the last. "You can't just erase me like this," she shouted during one particularly heated exchange. "This is still my home too." I stayed calm, though my patience was wearing thin. "No one's erasing you. But if you don't want to be part of this marriage, I'm not going to keep living like I'm the only one holding it together." That seemed to sting. For a moment, she looked like she might say something, but instead, she turned away, retreating to the bedroom and slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the house, a fitting punctuation mark to yet another unresolved fight. It was strange watching her react to the very thing she had asked for. She had claimed she wanted space, but when I started creating boundaries, financial, emotional, and otherwise, she seemed outraged. It was as if she hadn't considered what space really meant or what it would look like when I stopped being the man who always gave her what she wanted. As the days turned into weeks, her anger began to wane. The shouting matches became fewer, replaced by quieter moments of discomfort. She started watching me more closely, as if trying to figure out what had changed. I could see her struggling to process the new dynamic, adjusting to a version of me she didn't recognize. One night, she tried a different approach. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said softly, sitting across from me at the dining table. Her tone was almost conciliatory, but there was still an edge of defensiveness. "I just needed some time to figure things out. I didn't think you'd shut me out completely." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to fix things. "I'm not shutting you out," I said evenly. "I'm just done giving more than I get. You asked for space. I'm giving you all the space you need." Her expression faltered, and for a moment, I thought she might apologize or try to explain herself. But instead, she just nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked tired, almost defeated, but I didn't offer her comfort. That wasn't my role anymore. The quiet that followed our last conversation wasn't an ending. It was a transition. I could feel it in the air. There was no more shouting, no more accusations hurled in frustration. She wasn't trying to argue or guilt me anymore, but that didn't mean she had accepted things. Instead, it felt like she was waiting, watching, hoping I'd snap back to the man I used to be, the one who would bend, the one who would do whatever it took to fix things. But that man was gone, and I wasn't about to bring him back. I started taking the next steps to separate our lives, both practically and emotionally. It was methodical, almost mechanical, but there was a strange sense of relief in it. Every small action felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I had lost somewhere along the way. The house, once a shared space, became my focus. I started with the physical clutter, the things that screamed of her presence. Her decorations, the framed pictures she insisted on hanging in every room, even the throw pillows she bought to brighten up the space. One by one, they went into boxes. I didn't ask for her permission. I didn't need to. If she wanted them, she could take them when she left. The process wasn't without resistance. One afternoon, she walked in while I was packing away a set of decorative trinkets she had brought home years ago. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice sharp with accusation. "Clearing out the things I don't need anymore," I replied without looking up. Her face hardened. "This is still my home, too. You can't just throw everything away." I paused, meeting her gaze. "I'm not throwing anything away. If it's important to you, take it. But I'm done living in a space that doesn't feel like mine." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and left, slamming the door behind her. But this time, I didn't flinch. The anger in her reaction wasn't my problem anymore. With each box I packed, I felt lighter. It wasn't just about removing physical objects. It was about removing the weight they carried. Every item had been part of life I had worked so hard to build, but it was a life that didn't truly reflect who I was. Stripping it down to its bare bones felt like starting over, not just in the house, but in my own identity. Emotionally, the changes were harder. I had spent so many years wrapped up in her moods, her needs, her problems. Detangling myself from that wasn't easy. At first, I catch myself wanting to ask how her day was or offer to help when she looked overwhelmed. But I stopped myself every time. She had made it clear she didn't want my involvement, and I wasn't about to offer it anymore. There were moments when I wondered if I was being too harsh, if maybe I should soften, give her one more chance. But then I remembered all the times I had put her first and been met with indifference. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about self-respect. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was trying to heal myself. The more distance I put between us, the more I realized how much I had lost in our marriage. Not just time or effort, but pieces of who I was. I started revisiting old hobbies I had abandoned, dusting off my guitar, picking up books I'd been meaning to read for years. I reached out to friends I hadn't seen in far too long. It was strange at first to focus on myself. It felt almost selfish, but also necessary. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for someone else. She noticed the changes, of course. Her expressions grew tighter, her demeanor more reserved. She tried in small ways to re-establish the dynamic we once had. Casual comments, shared jokes, small gestures meant to test the waters. But I didn't engage. Not out of spite, but because I couldn't go back to that version of myself. I wouldn't. When the last box was packed and the house finally felt like mine again, a strange sense of peace settled over me. It wasn't the kind of triumphant peace you see in movies, with victorious music playing in the background. It was quieter, humbler, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. She didn't leave immediately. For a while, she lingered in the background, as though testing whether the changes I had made were permanent. I could feel her watching me, her presence more of a shadow than a partnership. She was waiting, perhaps hoping for a crack to show in my resolve. But there was none. I wasn't playing games. I wasn't holding out for her to wake up one day and choose me again. I had stopped waiting for her the moment I started choosing myself.